Good evening, and welcome to our regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It's June 14th, 2018, and we're underway at 7 p.m. Before we get started on our agenda, I would like to point out we do have one Boy Scout here with us tonight. We have Josh. Josh, stand up so council can see you. Appreciate it. And he's working on his community service and communication merit badges, Troop 680, and they meet at the LDS Church over close to Mainland. Pay attention. There'll be a test afterwards on city government, but it's an easy test. Okay, next up on our agenda is our invocation. Tonight, Councilmember Massey will take care of the invocation, and then we'll have the pledges to the American and Texas flag. So if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Dear Lord, just first let me thank you for this beautiful weather. It's hot, but it's nice to have another season. Please give us wisdom as we discuss the issues coming before us today. Give us and let us speak with courtesy and to each other. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, our next item of business is a public hearing. And we will start this public hearing, according to my watch, at 7:02. And this public hearing is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on a request from city staff to amend Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapters 34, Environment, 66, Signs, and 98, Zoning, by providing for the Planning and Zoning Commission to review and make recommendations to the City Council for final action on commercial developments and single-family residential subdivision developments, exterior lighting, signage, and conceptual design plans. And I take it we have no one signed up to speak?
Nope.
Okay, we have no one that chose to speak on this, so we will close the hearing at 7:03. Next up, we have citizens to be heard. Nobody?
Nobody.
No citizens signed up to speak, so we will move on to our consent agenda. For Josh and others in the audience and those watching on TV, consent agenda tonight is items 4 through 9, and it's made up of a grouping of agenda items that the intent by the staff and myself is for council to consider all of them in one motion and one second, and that way expedite the meeting. However, the council does have the prerogative to ask some questions. If they're fairly easily and quickly answered, we can handle them that way. Otherwise, we'll pull the item for full discussion with the rest of the agenda. So I would ask, are there any questions on 4 through 9 or any requests to pull any of those items?
Mayor, I have a question on agenda 8.
Okay.
Agenda item 8. I meant to call Josh earlier today, but I forgot, so hopefully you guys can answer this. I know we're moving some money from the school safety fund budget for traffic signal expenditures. Are we repairing a traffic signal or adding one? Or
Rick could answer that.
I'm sorry, Rick, I should have called you earlier.
No, that's fine.
that.
Councilman, we are taking excess revenues and essentially balancing the school safety fund budget. So no money is leaving or coming into the school safety fund budget. It's just because we have received more revenues than anticipated, and we've expended more than we anticipated. We're balancing those two out.
Okay, so we're not adding a signal that's, I guess, for repairs and things like that?
Yeah, and predominantly that goes to Seiko Electric. We have a contract with them to
Okay.
repair traffic lights that we own.
Okay, that answers my question, thank you.
Any other questions or request to pull an item? Okay, then I would ask for a motion to approve consent agenda items 4 through 9.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we approve consent agenda items 5 through 9. Okay,
It's 4 through 9.
I've got 5.
It's 4.
Yeah, you got it
Previous
on the
page.
first page.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I made a
I've been
mistake.
saying 4 through 9.
He wants
You're
to do the
right.
minutes separately.
I'm sorry, 4 through 9.
Right, I'm the mayor.
I'm sorry, 4 through 9, okay, I apologize.
Okay, items 4 through 9. Little comic relief here. So do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Fredericks. So we have a motion from Buys, a second from Fredericks to approve consent agenda items 4 through 9, no discussion being required or requested. We'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. The consent agenda items 4 through 9 are approved. That takes us to item number 10, which is discussion and action on an item amending Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 34, Environment, 66 Signs, 98 Zoning, and providing for City Council to review and action on commercial developments and single-family residential subdivision developments, exterior lighting, signage, and conceptual design. This pertains to the planning and zoning and taking their final approval authority and bringing that over to council. We've discussed this. The Planning and Zoning Commission gave us no recommendations. In fact, they chose to postpone this item, understanding that it would prevent council from taking any action on it. However, we can still discuss this again so that it's clear to Planning and Zoning what the council's thoughts are on this if they watch the video and read the minutes. So I would appreciate some discussion on this. And we would start, Cynthia, you mind giving us your thoughts on this item?
Oh, as I mentioned when we discussed this previously, I'm very much for doing this. I mentioned that I often am asked by citizens, what this building is, or what, when they start clearing land, and it embarrasses me that I don't even know. And it is because the Planning and Zoning Commission has the final approval. And yet, I'm sure the Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't get calls of people upset about things. I do. I'm an elected official, and I believe that the elected officials should be the ones to answer for these types of things, and we should know what's going on in the city. So I'm very much for this.
Thank you. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see this as a couple different things that we're looking at. Obviously, one of which is the signs. The other part of this, if I'm not mistaken, was the, where is it in here? The, for lack of a better thing, the site plan, is that correct? There's something, the what?
Conceptual.
Conceptual site plan.
Conceptual,
So there's really two parts to it. One is just the signs themselves, the other is the conceptual site plan. And I got to thinking about why, I at our last meeting, I indicated I was in favor, but my thought process then was slightly different than Councilmember Massey's, and not a matter of knowledge as much as a matter of sometimes of frustration of the efficiency and such of the Planning and Zoning Commission and such. With regard to the knowledge aspect of it, of course, with the exception of due to car trouble, I missed the last Planning and Zoning meeting. I've probably not missed but one or two in the last 5-6 years. So I'm aware of what they see, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem that Councilmember Massey is identifying, and that is there are still a lot of things that are going on that have not yet even gone to Planning and Zoning. Those which do go to Planning and Zoning, and I mentioned this to our city administrator earlier, was that our chairman, Greg Michelle, does a very good job of summarizing the actions of every planning and zoning meeting. And within a day or so, he has that at the city administrator's desk, and I made a comment that while I'm aware of it, because I'm generally at the meetings, the council doesn't see that report unless there happens to be an agenda item on our agenda requiring that to be done. That could be one of the steps necessary to avoid us not knowing what's going on in planning and zoning, even if an individual isn't able to attend the meeting. There's still a lot of stuff that goes on in the city that doesn't even get to planning and zoning or council at that point. It's all in development, it's in discussion. The mayor may very well be aware of it. City administrator clearly is part of that discussion, but it never gets to council until it all of a sudden becomes a sign. So from the sign perspective, I guess I'm a little bit torn on that one, because if it's strictly information, we can solve that by better communication within our own organization, rather than wrest that from the planning and zoning. The question of whether or not they follow our guidance is another question, right? We've had a number of issues recently with signs where planning and zoning has unanimously said, no, this is clearly not within the scope of what we believe the city wants, and it's certainly not within the scope of what our ordinance requires. And then it comes to council, and after a lot of debate and sometimes a split decision, council then approves something that they unanimously decline. So from that perspective, I see that as more of a control issue rather than an information issue. That's the part where I'm a little bit concerned. Maybe we have a problem with planning and zoning if we can't trust them to do what we believe the ordinance says and what the council's instructions are. It's a different topic than just changing the ordinance to say that from here on forward, no planning and zoning essentially has any say in what goes on in the city, because all they do is say, yeah, we think it's good, and then we don't do anything with it. It really just eliminates the need for planning and zoning if we're not going to let them have any control or power or anything. We're in the process of looking at the sign ordinance, and one of the things that we can do is to make that clear enough that maybe if the sign ordinance is clear enough and has no problems whatsoever and reflects the intent of the council, then maybe planning and zoning can make the final decision on that, because then it complies with what we're expecting to be done. With regard to the site planning and the site design, that I do think needs to come to city council, because that does involve a lot more than just maybe a sign in front or a window sign that's not something that we can regulate clearly by an ordinance. Those were my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
I guess my comments are almost along the same lines, because I kind of see this as and weakening is probably not a very good word, but a decrease of power, if you want to say it, of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we have those citizens here to provide a service to help us out, and I think we should give them the responsibility to perform that duty. Now I understand there's probably some issues with planning and zoning internally that probably, if need be, need addressed, but I did. The one comment as I was reading through here was, if we're going to strengthen up the sign ordinance, why does all this stuff have to come through council? So if we were to, and we're in the process of strengthening up the sign ordinance, I don't see where we would have to get involved in all the signs and all this stuff coming through council for the signs. I'm okay with the other stuff, because I'm like Cynthia, I do find myself unprepared and not knowing what's going on at times, and this would provide a little bit more information to us. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Bert?
Okay, those last comments by council members Blue and Fredericks were not expressed at the last meeting, so that's something new to think about. I don't know how I feel about that, but I just have one question, since our attorney's here. Frank, how many cities do it the way we're doing it now? And I think it was said at the last meeting that you don't know of any, right?
A lot of my cities do give the Planning and Zoning Commission the right to finalize plats, but that's basically it. With regards to signs and some of these other authority given to Planning and Zoning, that usually is with the City Council.
Okay, but there are cities that do business like we do? The P and Z has the power that they have right now?
I know of no city that has as much power that your P and Z
Okay.
has as the city of Helotes.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, the new thing about the signs is something I guess since we're just discussing it again, something I'd have to think about. But we also need to think about that no other city does it the way we do it right now. So I think we need to change it. That's all I have.
Okay, yeah, I just noticed, last time we had an email from Frank, in answer to my question on this before we brought it to you guys and sent it to P and Z, but I would like to read just one sentence out of here, maybe two. It says, Helotes gives its P and Z authority not just over the plating process, but it also gives them jurisdiction over the review of commercial construction for compliance with the architecture review standards set by the city. While an applicant not happy with a decision of the P and Z can appeal to the city council, if the city council is not happy with the decision by P and Z regarding the architectural review, they would have no recourse since the P and Z decision is final if accepted by the applicant. So this strengthens the reason for at least going with the conceptual design approvals. City council, you guys, having that final authority. Then he goes on to say, an easy fix to this issue is to still give P and Z initial jurisdiction to review, but limit them to making a recommendation to the council like it does for zoning amendments, rezoning and variances, and not let them make final decisions. And that was your answer to my question. And then he went on to give a little bit of legal jargon in there. But that was basically why we brought this to you guys initially anyway. Cynthia, any follow-up to
Yes, I do.
the rest of them?
I was a liaison for the planning and zoning when Alex was still on planning and zoning. And so, I mean, for I guess a year or two. And I was always impressed by their decision-making. But every now and then, especially if there was a crowd of people, they would be very influenced by the demeanor and the way that people were acting. I noticed that. And so sometimes they would have a really hard time making a decision about certain things. And then this decision regarding the tower in front of Helotes Park Estates, that was a variance request, as I recall, and they granted it. Thank God that they did not have final power on that, that it had to come to us. But I think there's some fine people on planning and zoning, and they do a very good job, and they have. But I don't see this as wresting power away from them. I see this as working with them. They're still going to give us recommendations, and I can tell you, I have always listened to their recommendations, and most of the time I voted in favor of whatever their recommendation was. I think maybe 2 or 3 times I haven't. And so I don't see this as wrestling power. I just think that as an elected official, we have the ultimate authority, or we should know what's going on. We're the ones who get the phone calls when people complain, and we're out there, and that's our job. They can make their decisions. They can let us know. And as I said, I think that I don't think this is wrestling power from them. As for the sign part, that part doesn't really bother me so much. If we let them have the final power, if we do work on the ordinance, so I'm willing to let that, but stand. But on the other hand, I don't see taking that either. Or if they're giving us a recommendation, and we can decide whether or not to take it or not. But it is going to add more on our list of agenda things to do. So we might want to consider, do we really want to get back and really get into the sign thing when we don't really need to, if we tighten up the ordinance a bit. So that's kind of where I am.
Alex?
Thank you. Like I said at the beginning, I'm a little torn with this. Part of me really wants to say, yes, it's the right thing to do, and then part of me says that I'm a little, concerned that it's a little overkill. But I did want to ask her, if I may, Ms. Mayor, our attorney, a question on that. When you say that the cities don't grant planning and zoning this, do a lot of the cities have an architectural review committee that takes care of a lot of this? Because we did away with it, and that's when all the signs started going to planning and zoning. And the architectural review committee may very well have in other cities the authority that we've now granted to our planning and zoning. I kind of find it hard to believe that all the cities review every sign that comes before them. That doesn't seem very practical. And that most of them are either approved because of the ordinance directly at staff and never have to go anywhere else for approval. And that may be part of fault of our ordinance more so than it is the organization and the way we structure it, so.
Councilman, a lot of the cities that I represent do have architectural review boards, but they too are simply recommending bodies. I do know of one city that did give their architectural review board the authority for signage. After 3 months, they took it back. So, but it is, like I said, in most instances, they're a strictly recommending body.
Thank you. I can certainly live with it. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, if we could make the ordinance stronger to prevent them even having to go to planning and zoning or us, I think that would be the ideal, is to where there is, because we have some ambiguities, we also have some disagreements on how strong it should be, but if we can make it to where they don't have to go anywhere for approval and staff can take care of it because of the ordinance is very clear and then I think that would be ideal. So, but I can live with this. I have some reservations nagging me in the back, that's all. Thank you.
Paul,
No, no, sir. I'm fine.
you're fine?
Yes, sir.
Bart?
Just give me a second here.
We mind if
Well,
I interject a couple
yeah,
of
go
things while
ahead.
you're
Go
thinking? I do, the power thing bothers me. I would like to just remind everybody that the Planning and Zoning Commission or committee is a standing committee. And typically, committees, as Frank has said, are advisory. They have an advisory capacity. If they make a recommendation, you as elected officials are not obligated to follow that recommendation. However, I would think that it would be your responsibility to really look at that recommendation and try to understand where it came from, but you have to make your own decision. An advisory committee member can't expect an elected official to automatically be obligated to follow their recommendation. Otherwise, you might as well let them have the power. So it's not really, in my mind, as Cynthia said, a power issue. They shouldn't feel that way. And I don't think we're taking back anything. It's just we're trying to put it where it belongs, and that's with the elected officials as far as the responsibility for final approval. And I don't know that the ordinance needs to be stronger. If you recall, and you'll see in my cover sheet for it, the whole idea was for us to really dig into this stuff, hopefully section by section over time, with the idea of making it more clear, concise, and easy to understand. And the whole object is to alleviate staff from having to consider all of this ambiguity and to eliminate a lot of the variance requests. So that's
what I
what our
meant by stronger,
total
sir.
objective is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Bert.
Okay, I got a question. Maybe it's for, Rick, how long have you been city administrator?
10 years?
10 years? Were you here when the previous mayor was in office?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember,
Is
didn't,
EDC specialist.
oh, is it
Yeah.
EDC specialist? Do you remember, wasn't it like the way we're trying to change it to now back then? Didn't that mayor and council change it to the way it is now? Or do you, am I not correct about that?
Your question is whether,
I
who changed it to where
thought it used to
P&Z?
be that council had what we're trying to do now.
No, I think
And
that
that was
used to-
changed by that,
that used to rest with the ARB. They had the approval authority at that time. And then when
when the
we
ARB went,
eliminated the ARB, we kept, obviously, we had to keep P&Z, and we moved that authority to planning and zoning.
okay. So council's never had this before, this type of, okay, I'll just say it,
You know,
power?
I would have to go back and really look for sure, but my recollection is ARB did have approval authority at the time.
Okay. I just thought, I thought that's the way it happened. I thought council used to have this
It's
power.
authority, it's
This
not
authority,
power.
not
it's
power, authority, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this authority, and it was changed during a certain time period by another council.
No, it was changed by this council, moving that authority to planning and zoning when y'all got rid of the architectural review board.
Boy, we'd have to go back and see when that happened. Because you were moved to city administrator in August, I believe, August 28th of '08.
And I was just thinking that maybe the council had this before and it was changed. That's all, that's the only question I had. You don't remember, do you?
Cynthia, anything else?
Nope.
Alex, one last shot?
Nope.
I do have a question about planning and zoning. They just didn't even want to discuss it. Well, you weren't at the meeting. so-
I watched the video today. Rick was there. They had some minor, I wouldn't call it discussion, and then they just decided that the action they wanted to take was to postpone, understanding that council would not be able to take action,
So we can't take action until they take action?
correct, till they make a recommendation, according to Frank.
They have to make a recommendation?
Yeah, recommendation.
Okay.
So we would,
But how long do they have to make a recommendation? I mean, can this go on for
that-
a long time? Or do they have to do
it
it
could.
every time?
Technically, you're only supposed to postpone maximum of a couple of times, but I guess in theory, they can keep postponing for whatever reason they have. I believe if they read the minutes and watch the video, they'll see that it's leaning toward at least most of this. I would like to say it would be interesting to keep signs in the, under the authority of council, and if you guys decide it's too much work, you can always turn around and give it back to them, but it's worth giving a try, in my opinion. You guys are the final deciding factor. But I guess we're looking, the only action I guess we can take is to, like they did, postpone it, because that is an action, and we would have to postpone it until July 12th, which would be the meeting following their next meeting on the first Tuesday of July. And so that would be the appropriate action that we would take. Am I correct on that, Frank?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Do we need a motion?
So I would look for a motion and a second if you guys are finished discussing it, and then we'll bring it back like it is with the signs. And if y'all, after one more time at this, decide you want to give them the signs or let them keep the sign authority, that's fine. But I would recommend at least taking it for a while and seeing how it works out.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone agenda item number 10.
Okay,
Until after the next P and Z meeting.
okay, we have a motion to postpone. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion from Buys, a second from Blue. No further discussion. We'll call the question. All in favor of postponing until July 12th, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That takes us to 11, discussion of and direction on an ordinance amending Municipal Code of Ordinance, Chapter 66, signs. Well, this is not written exactly like it was last time. It's specifically for 66-44A banners. So if I can have a motion and a second to, this is a discussion and direction. We don't need a motion on this one. So we'll just look for more discussion. I did send you guys, or Selena did for me, an extra note on my thoughts on the items that we talked about last night, or last meeting, and I don't have that with me. Do you have an extra copy?
You can have mine.
Yeah, here.
It's on the dais.
Was it on the dais?
Here you go.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, great.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but something just dawned on me. I'd like to clarify with our city administrator about the last item.
Okay.
July 3rd is the first Tuesday of July, and that is the night of the fireworks display. Is planning and zoning still meeting?
No, they're meeting July 10th.
10th? Well, that would still let us do it on the 12th.
Before our meeting, okay. It just dawned on me, the dates were like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't check that, so that's good pick. Thanks, Alex. didn't bring mine, I don't have one, so we'll share.
I've got one. I printed
you
one.
do?
I printed one up at the house.
Oh, okay, very good.
He's got one.
Okay, so what I was hoping we could do this time is just start with the A1, the purpose, and talk about the language as we did before. Right now, it says, purpose is to advertise a special event other than a recurring event which occurs on a regular basis. And I think everyone pretty well decided that's pretty obscure and a little bit confusing and easy to misinterpret. So what I had just put together from the discussion last time would be something along the lines of to advertise a grand opening of a business, special sale event, an annual festival or annual event hosted by a for-profit business or a nonprofit organization, and to be held within the corporate city limits of Helotes. I guess we could add ETJ in there, since we do have a lot of people in the ETJ. And so, Alex, you want to start out with that section, and we'll try and take it section by section, and see if we can bring it down to something that Rick and the staff and I can put together in the form of a new section that we can bring back to you all next time for
So
action.
strictly with A1 right now?
That would be great, and then
So-
we'll just hit each one.
So we talk about special event being problematic and replace it with special sale event seems to be the same problem. I don't know how we
Well,
identify
I
the word
wrestled,
special and event again.
and that's
It's
what we're
still
here
there.
for. I wrestled with that, but pick a word for sale event. I would think just a regular 10% off sale would probably not fall under it, but like a big sale, a clearance sale or something like that's what I had in mind, so.
Can you just put sales event?
Well, you take out special, and that's what you have is sale event.
But nonprofits, they have events and they're not sales. So that they're,
A grand opening or an annual, I'm talking about an annual festival or an annual event, to eliminate the monthly things or the quarterly things, because the intent was not to be a recurring event in the ordinances it's written now.
but are we going to go, I don't know, I just have a question
Go
about.
ahead. It's a discussion. We'll kind of let it free
Okay.
flow.
I've been thinking a lot about this. If we do this and we just say it's basically once a year, they can put up a banner. That's basically what this is saying for a special event. So, for example, and I'm going to use Casa Helotes because they have their little fundraising the first Friday, I guess, of every month. And that's their special event. It's their little fundraising event, and they have it every month. So this would eliminate them being able to put anything up at all for that.
Well, the way it's written now, it precludes that because they can only do it once a quarter.
Yes, but we're going to also talk about calendar year and consecutive, and actually, the more I thought about it, the way the ordinance is written right now, when you just have 30 calendar days, it's not consecutive. They can, within a quarter, they can interpret it, and to me, it's correct.
Right. Well, anyone can interpret anything, but
No,
it
but-
comes down to the city.
But yes, but if we add consecutive, I think that's going to mess it up as well. Why would someone who has one event, the beginning of a month, want to have a sign up for 30 days just for the one quarter when they have one every month? And
Correct.
why is it wrong for us to penalize either a nonprofit or a business who wants to have one special event or one sales event once a month? I mean, I don't understand the rationale between doing that. Why can't they have a banner up for 10 days prior to an event once a month if I just don't understand why we would want to hamper them from doing that.
Well, the rationale is the existing ordinance limits it to once per quarter. And the interpretation by staff has always been that 30 days, whether it's, as I said in my summary last time and this time, whether it's 1 day, 5 days, 10 days, or 30 days, that's still one period. It says up to 30 calendar days. So as I pointed out, they could have 6 5-day events in one quarter if you let them just have a free flow of those 30 days. They could have 5 events for 6 days or 3 events for 10 days. So that's part of the confusion staff has in interpreting this. So that's why we're trying to tie it down. What I wrote here was what staff and I, or at least I gleaned from last time when we had the discussion, was we wanted to eliminate the repetitive banners by any organization. But like Casa Lotus has their spaghetti dinner, and then they have, I think, one other major fundraiser. So those are 2 annual events. They could have banners for
What is
that.
their other annual? I know the spaghetti dinner is one of them. What's
I
the other?
can't remember. It seemed,
5K run, don't they?
oh, yeah, the 5K run, yeah. Those are their
So
2.
this would preclude them from putting any signs up for their food truck festival. They would not be able to do that.
Not on a monthly basis. Right now, they could do it quarterly, which is what we explained to them the other day. Unless they.
Again, and I'll disagree with you, because it says they had 30 calendar days within a quarter. It didn't say 30 consecutive, it said 30 days, so they did do it in 10-day increments before each of those events. A quarter is 3 months, right?
4 months. 3 months, yeah, 3 months.
So that's 10, 10, and 10. That's one for each event. And
Yeah.
I don't see, I guess I'm having an issue with why is that such a big problem? It's a nonprofit, that's one of the ways they bring in their money. It's not causing anybody any problems. Their food truck is licensed. I don't understand. It's from 6 to 10 in the evening. They want to put a sign up saying that this is going on this weekend. I'm not saying, I just want to know what the problem is for them doing that, or for any organization wanting to do that. To have a sign up in front of Broadway or a banner. What's the issue? Why do we not want that? For them or for any other organization? Can someone answer that question?
Well, like I say, the interpretation that we've had was 1 time per quarter, up to 30 days. The fact that it doesn't say consecutive days is part of the problem. So we either fix that, I don't really care. You guys are the ones that make the decision. If you want banners up there all the time, you have to make the ordinance read that way. Right now, it's confusing, and that's what we're trying to eliminate.
I think adding consecutive is going to make it prohibitive for some of the events that go on around here.
Well, then you have to make it more clear that the 30 days, regardless of whether it says consecutive, can be broken up into any number of days of duration events. So an organization.
Not say that, it doesn't have to be every weekend, but we could say it could be broken up to once a month. 10 days for each of the months. Instead of every weekend, if this is something that we don't want to have, we don't want them to have a sign up every weekend. Does anyone,
Alex?
ask questions.
Alex?
I'll
Yeah,
jump in.
this is a free flow.
Not to attack that debate, but the question really to me is not so much whether it is a nonprofit or a for-profit, not so much whether it is that. If we talk about a special sale, I could envision a store deciding to have a Labor Day sale. It's a once-a-year sale. They also may very well decide to have an Independence Day sale, also once a year. And then they could also have a Memorial Day sale, or a spring break sale, or a winter is coming sale. And next thing you know, they can have annual events multiple times a year and call it something different every time. So the question to me is not so much whether or not someone's, picking on Casa Helotes or not picking on somebody else or anything else, to me as much as it is the intent of the sign ordinance, the way I thought it was originally intended when written, though probably not written clearly enough to its intent, was to say you can have 1 banner per quarter for up to 30 days for an event, But it wasn't written in that fashion, which allowed essentially a loophole to occur where individuals said, well, I want 6 banners 5 times a quarter, and then they eventually have banners constantly. The question to me is not so much that as much as in my goal, which I realize sometimes I'm in the minority here, is that I think that Helotes is a very beautiful city and that we do not have a lot of clutter. And constant banners and signs on every street corner and in front of every business. Now, we're talking about one fundraiser, but we have, as you quoted multiple times in the past, dozens and dozens of nonprofits in Helotes. And we have many, many dozens of businesses who would love to have weekly and/or monthly sale advertising their particular product, and they can call it any number of things. But if we go down the road of allowing every business to have the opportunity to have a banner as frequently as this might imply, then I think we're going to have a very cluttered look. And while no one's complained about it, it's probably because it hasn't occurred. And I think that the more we allow these to occur, especially on the off-premise, and I'm not really in favor of the off-premise sign. If they're going to have a banner or sign, it should be on-premise. We still have to discuss the issue of the frequency of those signs and the number of those signs. And so that, to me, is the bigger concern. It's not which business. It's not whether or not we're trying to or not trying to hamper an individual nonprofit from fundraising. It's a matter of, do we want to have 6, 7, 8 banners constantly up on every corner in the city? I don't think that's appealing, and I don't believe that's why the citizens moved here for the beautiful city that we have. That's kind of my approach to this, and whether or not the end result of what we do will enable or not enable a plethora of signs all over the city. I would rather we err on the conservative nature with regard to that than to be too lax, because no matter what we grant, whether it's conservative or lax, they're going to want more. It's that simple. That's always the way it's going to go. So with regard to 1A, I think that it still doesn't necessarily clarify the frequency or the duration or the number in any given time as far as the number of banners, because that's what we're talking about, banners, not signs, but banners that can be done. I think we need to restrict that number to a much smaller amount, and if there's heartburn about dividing nonprofit versus for-profit, then I say we be equal and be more restrictive rather than, if people don't want to do a nonprofit, there's a more lax than for-profit. But my goal is to see that we don't completely cover the city with signs and make it a city that we don't want to drive down the street because it's so cluttered with signs and things, whether it's business, nonprofit, or otherwise.
And 1A is just for purpose. Number and duration come later.
Yeah, but they're all connected.
Yeah, sure. So everybody gets a chance. Paul?
So the only thing I could really suggest on the A1 would be, instead of special sale, maybe business event and/or fundraiser. That's the only thing I could come up with. But I'm okay with special sale, but business event for the for-profit fundraiser, I don't know if would be appropriate for the nonprofit.
Well, what about the annual festival or annual event? I'd really prefer to stay out of this and let you guys, but I'm trying to get something for staff to be able to work with to bring this back to hopefully finalize the banner section rather than just talk about it every time. So if we could get definitive guidance for staff. I know Selena's down there waiting to take notes, and so is Rick, and I'm trying to too, but we're really trying to get some meat here so we can bring it back and tie this part up and then maybe bring some other parts back. So is there anything else 1A, it doesn't sound like it's resolved.
Well, you can't really resolve it because, you've got to resolve the other things before you can resolve this one. Like we're talking about just putting one banner over there. So if Casa Helotes puts a banner up there,
Okay.
This is what I was thinking about before. Okay, who gets to have that banner? Is it the first guy that lines up at the door in the morning?
Well, it depends.
If we're going to restrict it to one, and then if it's going to be, this all came about because an entity was putting up a banner every month. And it was in clear violation, in my mind, of our ordinance. Banner was too big, and it was in the right-of-way I hate to, but so was the Festival Association. I didn't know that. Been doing it for years and years and years. And this is where all this came from. To me, having the same banner in the same location, especially one that was that big, is, I get tired of looking at it. It is cluttered in my mind. So, I mean, it's nothing against CASA. CASA needs, I know they need to do their fundraising, and so does the Festival Association. But, I mean, to me, we can't answer 1A without answering the other ones.
Okay.
I mean,
So we'll leave that in limbo, and let's go to A2. Last time, you all seemed to believe 64 square feet was large enough for a banner, but to allow a variance request if someone wanted to have a banner of a larger size. And then you also discussed having the banner itself not exceed 48 inches or 4 feet in height and 16 feet in length. So I just put that here to see if I got that right, and then Selena, I think, addressed that in the minutes also. But are you still along that line?
we wanted to allow a request for a variance for a larger sign? I don't remember that.
I had put in there not to, but I believe somebody brought up the size.
I don't want to, in my mind, I'm speaking for myself, I don't want a bigger sign than a 4x16.
Okay.
And then, as far as the height goes, which one is that? That's back over here.
Well, just looking at that from Mr. Mayor, I concur that 64 square feet is there. I may have brought that up because our current ordinance does allow for
Yeah, there's,
something
yeah, but that's-
larger.
there's
And
a
it has to
section-
do with Festival
we'd have to-
Association.
we'd have to
and it's
change that.
specific to that. So if Festival Association doesn't have a problem with sticking with it, I think 64 square feet's fine. The height part had to do with how far off the ground the top of the sign was, as to whether or not it was going to block the building or block whatever. And I think we talked about not letting it be more than 4 feet at the top, but then I think someone brought up that you have to allow air to flow under it, so
That
it
was
might be higher, but I don't think we ever came to consensus there.
well, no, we didn't, and that's later on. But you talked about 6 feet, and you talked about 5 feet. Bert brought up the point, if you make them put it on the ground, the air can't circulate around it. This 4x16 is the banner itself, not how high it's allowed to be placed. So a 4x16 is 64 square feet.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. So Cynthia, any input on that?
No, I'm fine with that. And now, your suggestion was that it should not be eligible for variance?
And that was my suggestion.
Yeah,
I
okay.
concur.
I think that's fine. I just wanted to say that so that she could write that down. Maybe there's one thing we can all agree on.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I had put that in my notes at the beginning, recommendation to not allow a variance, I thought, or maybe that was prohibiting off-site banners. Anyway, no big deal. Okay, so y'all are okay with A2?
Yes. Would take out the variance request in my, is that right?
Okay.
Yeah.
64 square feet, and then we'll have to address that other section in the ordinance, and I have that, but not handy. Okay, A3, I tacked on down at the end of this, because we didn't really cover it before, and that is the height. It was discussed briefly with general consensus that the current allowable height of 12 feet above average grade be reduced to 5 or 6 feet above natural
Okay,
grade.
now, we're talking about the banner signs right now, right?
Banner signs.
Just the banners?
Banner
Okay.
I-
signs.
I'm not sure where A3 is.
It's on the last page.
It's on the very last page.
Page
We-
3 of 3
it
on the
wasn't
bottom.
It wasn't included in my original deal, so I wanted to put it down here. It's at the very bottom.
Oh, I see.
It just says, because the ordinance as it's written now allows a height of 12 feet above average grade. And then we talked about 5 feet or 6 feet, and then Alex had brought up, rather than average grade, say natural grade, because that precludes somebody from building a mound of dirt.
Right,
That would not
right.
be natural.
Yeah.
Still good with that?
You remember that? I think it was you that brought that up.
Remember I remember it being brought up, but
But I think the issue is reducing it from 12 feet to 5 or 6 feet, and that's for y'all to decide. So, Alex, you want to start?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I think in all of this discussion, we're making the assumption that it's a 4x16 banner that's put somewhere over there by Broadway. But what if it happens to be a banner that an individual decides to put on their property because we haven't talked about whether or not this is business or nonprofit, off-premise or on-premise yet. But I'm thinking maybe the 12-foot part may have to do with the business has 2 poles or 2 trees and they decide to suspend it.
Like City Hall does.
Yeah, and that may be where the 12-foot came from, and maybe there, I don't know, I was looking really quick to see if there was any other provision of here that talked about how they had to be put up, poles, trees, et cetera, but I could see how a business might want to suspend it between 2 trees on their property as opposed to putting poles on the ground, and I don't know, I just was thinking about that, so I don't have an answer for it, but I thought, would our indication of that dropping it to 5 feet have an impact on that?
I didn't even think
As
about
City
that.
Administrator, do you happen to know if any permit banners have been issued for things that might have an issue with that?
Yeah, permanent banners are mounted on buildings facades all the time, and they could be higher than,
And so those would probably be hung higher than that 4, 5, 6 feet, because they're trying to go above windows or things like that. Sorry, I just thought about that, and I didn't mean to.
Well, why don't we call it freestanding? The
That's what-
freestanding.
that's what I was
Freestanding
thinking.
would
Add the
solve
free-
that.
Yeah,
That's what I was
freestanding
thinking.
banners shouldn't be, and I'm for 5 feet. I don't
I'm
know
for
if
5
it's-
feet as well. Then
Yeah.
freestanding is a good clarification.
I think freestanding banners should not be higher than 5 feet above the natural grade.
Would freestanding then include also between trees or stuff like that? Or just on T-posts or
If they
something?
look nice between the trees, I don't know. Yeah,
I would think the answer to that would be if we could word it in such a way as to identify the difference between something attached to a building versus one not attached to a building, right? Because freestanding, to me, is, yeah, T-posts, poles in the ground, trees. It's not actually attached to the building. Therefore, the height, we could regulate lower.
Okay, so on A3, we're gonna move from 12 feet to 5 feet for a freestanding banner. Okay? And then we'll come up with something else for, I think there's something in there for buildings. Rick, I'm not sure, but it's not in this section, but we'll look at that. Okay, then to A4, back on the first page. If off-premises banners continue to be allowed, discussion included which specific locations would be available and seem to center around the intersection of Bandera and Hausman and Leslie Roads. Specifically, would all 4 corners of the intersection be available, or would banners be limited to 1 or 2 corners? And then we also briefly discussed, what about other intersections? Because Scenic Loop and Bandera could become a very popular intersection. Scenic Loop and Old Bandera Road. You have Braun and 1560, especially when it's widened, and then you have 1560 at Shane Field and Gulm. 2 of those corners are in our ETJ. So are we just limiting to the one major intersection at Bandera, Leslie, and Hausman, or are you gonna consider other major intersections for the future development of the city? And then we're also talking about discussion should include, since the time each of the 4 corners of this intersection are single tenant or single owners, only 1 banner may be displayed, and according to our ordinance now, at any one time. Multi-tenant retail centers are allowed to have 2 banners displayed at the same time. It needs to be decided whether to stay with 1 banner on any single-tenant property or increase the number of banners that can be displayed at any one time. So Cynthia, we'll start with you if you have any input.
Since Broadway Bank is the one that we're talking about mostly, I mean, that's the one that the people use quite a bit, and I've seen up to 3 signs there. I think 3 is pushing it. I think 1 is too little. And the other thing too is Broadway does, every now and then it puts up a sign for its, if it has a percentage discount or something. But for the most part, it allows the use for nonprofits. And I think to just have 1 there is not a good idea. I would like to see 2, because you could have it 1 here and 1 here, you know, like 1 in the front, fronting Bandera, and the other fronting Leslie. You know, that's kind of, I just think there should be 2.
It-
And the other, especially if we're not going to allow allow any signs to be on any of the other corners. Now, does that mean, we've always used the corner where Bitters, Mr. Bitters, that's a very, open and nice area. I don't know if he's going to continue to allow that after the businesses go in there. It may not. So I don't have any heartburn with having two signs there. Now, does this also mean political signs? Are political signs exempt from this?
Correct.
Okay. I'm for having two, whether on the corners.
Is that then two banners for any single tenant property in the city, or just for this particular one?
I'm thinking for the location. I'm not,
Because it's written, the ordinance is written now, single tenant properties or tracts have one banner and multi-tenant have two.
well, we could differentiate on the business, you're talking about businesses, right?
Talking about one tenant tracts or one property owner tract, which could be at Scenic Loop and Bandera Road. Those are single tenant tracts. Someone could put banners up there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I know when Mr. Bitter's property is going to be finished, it's going to be multi-tenant, isn't it?
Correct,
So then he won't be allowed two.
the way it's written now.
So, I don't know, I
Okay,
think
well-
that we need to differentiate between a nonprofit, in this situation, a nonprofit and a business.
Selena, would you put that next slide up? I just want to let you know there are for-profit businesses that advertise at Broadway Bank. Here's La Escondida, the business over there in Gray Forest. And then there have been some others, other organizations and other businesses, for-profit and nonprofit. So there aren't as many for-profit businesses, and I asked Ernest to pull all of the permits for banners in the last 2 years, and those are included in your packet now, and we do have some that were in there that were for-profit businesses. So you don't want to exclude them, I wouldn't think, but it's entirely up to you guys. Paul, you have any input on this particular section?
So I do think you're gonna have to allow it at intersections throughout the city, especially as the city grows. And, over at 1560 and Shamefeld Road, that's way out of the way. I think we're gonna have to allow it at intersections. I'm all for keeping it at one banner per lot. That'll kind of cut down on the clutter. So if I have my druthers, I'd put one banner per lot on the intersection.
Okay,
Because that would be
potentially.
four-way stop is 4 banners.
Yeah. And they're only, now we're talking about getting into duration. Last time you talked about having a maximum of 15 days rather than 30 days. And so that would allow 2 different banners per month on each lot. So anyway, so that's your input?
Yes, sir.
Bert?
On that side.
Okay. First of all, that sign's illegal, of course, we know that, it's in the right-of-way. I don't even know if you can put signs, I've said this numerous times, I don't even know if you can put signs at the Broadway Bank anymore on their property because of the plumbing that's in the ground over there. I've never done it. I've done plenty of,
I have some pictures that we'll show in a little bit on that.
so we're gonna be able to put a sign behind the sidewalk? Okay, we have events that overlap. We cannot just have, in my mind, just one banner up there. And have we ever had a banner at the Bill Miller's? Ever?
I don't-
Maybe on that fence.
I don't know
No,
that they
I've
allow
never
it,
seen it.
but nobody, I've never, I
I
don't
think
recall seeing
I've
them.
seen the ones that they put up between telephone poles up in the, high in the air. That might have happened once or twice over there. And then just speaking for the Festival Association, we've been putting up a sign at TC Plumbing on their fence. So we can't do that anymore?
No, you have you had a permit for that.
Yes, sir, but are you taking that permit away? Because we're taking that one
I'm
section.
not taking anything away.
No,
It's
not you,
guys.
not you. Are we taking the permit away for 2 banners for
That's
event?
part of this whole
Okay,
thing
well then,
is to figure
see,
out.
that's what I'm saying. We put up we put up another banner at TC Plumbing with their permission on their fence.
Mm-hmm.
It's not obtrusive. It's a great location, a lot of traffic on 1560. It's great. I think we need at least 2 banners, and especially because we have most of our banners up in the spring and fall, because the weather's better. And that's just when our events happen. I mean, Marketplace right now, I think, is the only banner that ever goes up in the summertime over there. I can't remember another banner going up in the summertime unless we have our bull blowout or something like that. But we need to have at least a couple of banners there on the Broadway Bank side, and if bidder allows us to keep doing it over there, and then possibly over there where the vacant lot is, in my mind. The only reason I say that is because, okay, let's say we go ahead and limit it to 1 banner over there per unit, one at Bidders and one at Broadway Bank. How do you determine who gets to have that banner?
Keep in mind, the way the ordinance is written now,
Yes, sir?
only 1 banner is allowed.
No, I
on
understand
a
that.
single
I'm just saying,
tenant.
I'm
The
just saying,
fact that
if we
there's
keep
2 or
it that.
3 means that it hasn't been
It
regulated.
hasn't been, well, nothing's been regulated because the signs have been in the right of way.
That's what we're trying to fix.
Okay, I understand that. But I still don't see how you're going to tell, one organization, hey, you didn't get here in time. I mean,
Well, somebody's going to be disappointed at some point because they're going to be more than,
and then also,
Space available.
we were talking about, since that place right there, I can't read it very well, that's not in the city limits?
that's in Gray Forest.
That's
That's
in Gray-
actually on the other side of Gray Forest.
Okay, so we're talking about just limiting it to banners in the, just for the city limits of Helotes. Is that correct?
That's up to you guys. These are
We're
all,
talking about it, that's what I said.
yeah, that's all.
I'm just
all
bringing
the
it out there.
suggestions. Bring it out there.
So, I mean, these are all things that,
Ernest said right now, we have businesses that are not in Helotes
Mm-hmm.
putting up banners where the event's not in Helotes. And so
yeah, like the
he's
the
concerned
Cajun
about
Fest.
that.
The Cajun Fest puts up theirs, and it's in Lake Hills, Texas.
And there was another couple of them on this list. So you have to decide, out of the city businesses coming into, say, the Festival Association, like the Highland Games, the car shows, all those kinds of things. I mean, that's perfectly legitimate because the event's in the city. So these are the things we're trying to
This,
work
this
out.
place right here is a nonprofit?
No, it's
Oh,
a
it's-
for-profit. That's what
oh,
I'm
it's
trying to show
for-profit.
you.
Oh, okay.
You guys said only nonprofits advertise there, and I found 2 or 3, but I only had a picture of that one.
But we're gonna have nonprofits from outside the city want to use that corner too, so.
Well, if their event is in the city, then that's being allowed now.
Well, how many
You can see
banners
this
did we put
list,
on
there's
there?
all kinds of organizations that are not in the city, but they have their events in the city.
Would you say, Paul?
I'm just, I mean, if it's not 1, if it's not 2, where do we stop? We gotta set a number, so.
2.
Is it 2, is it 3?
I think 2.
So you'd potentially have 8 banners on a 4-way intersection?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you could potentially, but we have never had that.
No.
Oh, and we could say that you can't have, if we're gonna allow 2 banners for the same event, you can't have another banner of the same event at that intersection, like Any Baby Can did.
Right.
That's what I would be for.
Okay, Alex, you're up.
I think one of the things we have to address offhand, off at the beginning, is whether we have to separate the on-premise versus off-premise. And I am of the opinion that from an on-premise perspective, it should stay at 1. So if any entity wants to have a banner on their own premise, then there should only be 1 banner located for a single tenant and 2 banners for a multi-tenant location, the way our ordinance is currently written. The question I have is whether or not we're allowing more than 1 at a single location for off-premise banners, and whether or not we are going to allow nonprofit or for-profit in the city event, in the city business, et cetera, for off-premise at all. Obviously, if it's not occurring in the city, then the on-premise is a moot point, right? Because they can't have one because they're not in the city. So it's really the off-premise one that's kind of up for debate on this one. And I am of the opinion that probably 2 per lot, per corner, and I would say per corner, not necessarily per single or multi-tenant corner, because it's really the corner that we're talking about. I think 2 would be appropriate. I'm not happy with the idea of 8 being allowed. I don't know whether it would or wouldn't occur, but I could envision that at certain times, depending on what event, maybe it's in the spring and Cornevale's coming and some relay race is coming and somebody else decides to have a 5K run and then somebody else is doing a fundraiser, you could very well end up with 4 or 5. And of course, you would only have 2 per. But then does our city keep track of which corner? I believe it does, right? They're told which corner they can go to?
It's on the permit application.
Okay, so they would be told which corner. Although I don't think we've seen any of Bill Miller because I just don't think they permit it. And I'm not so sure the bank has been permitting any either on their corner. And I agree with you. I don't think once that other corner gets developed, I don't think he's going to be happy with having a big sign in front of his businesses, which he's going to want to develop. So we're right back to Broadway, and I think 2 would be the case. So that's my opinion. I think 2 on the corners there. With regard to which corners, we get right back to if it's every corner in the city, then we're right back to the clutter that I'm not real thrilled with. But I do agree that it may be not just that particular corner. I think that the ones mentioned by the mayor might be reasonable in the sense of the scenic loop and Highway 16 and probably the Braun and 1560. And of course, we only have 2 corners of the Shanefield and 1560.
Right, that's what I
because
said.
the other 2 are in San Antonio.
Right.
And those corners would probably not be unreasonable. Clearly, I don't think that an event or organization should have more than 1 banner at a corner, but I also then have to raise the next question is, should that same event have the ability to post one if we expand it to other corners, could they end up with 4? Because we have 4 intersections we're going to allow it in. I don't think so. I think we should be able to limit the number of banners that they have to 2. Right? Maybe one on either end of town. I'm of the opinion that the property owner gets to decide who gets the banner first, not
Exactly.
us.
That's what we
right?
said,
So
yeah.
if Broadway says no, I know that we saw in our paperwork all of the stuff where Broadway Bank says, you have my permission, and by the way, I don't regulate or control or have any say as to, no, that's not true, because our ordinance says the property owner is responsible for regulating who does and doesn't put a banner on their property. And I think that they should be given more of the onus of keeping track of, one, where it is, because it's their property that people are walking on and looking at, and they ought to have something there. We can't enforce that part of it, but I am of the opinion that the property owner decides who does or doesn't get the banner on their property. They're the owner.
May I ask a question about that? Is there a way that we could, once we finalize this, we need to let the property owner know, from now on, this has been the change in ordinance, and they must get permission from you, and there are only 2 are allowed. Can we, whoever owns all these properties we're talking about on the corners, because I'm feeling like at some point, this is gonna be a moot point. I think that a lot of them are gonna say, you know what, I don't want any more signs anywhere on my property. Because it's gonna become a headache.
Yeah.
But I think that we should send them a notice, this is the ordinance, and you need, you're allowed up to 2 signs, and, whatever the ordinance is, and
I agree. I think that should come from the city. I think it should go to all of the property owners of the intersections that we may end up designating as such. And I think it needs to give them notice that that's the case. But that's, again, my opinion. Further, I still have some heartburn about businesses having off-premise signage, and that includes banner. That's just me. I think that their banners should be on-premise, not off-premise, because I think that once we open up the off-premise banners to any business within the city, we are going to see a plethora of them, and I guarantee you're going to have a lot of sale events that just may happen to get the Broadway Bank before some of the other events that we have traditionally seen, and we're going to have some very unhappy individuals, whether it be any number of the nonprofits that have traditionally utilized this. In the past, I think I don't know if we've only allowed it to nonprofits, but it's only been utilized that way. But if we change our ordinance and the word gets out that any business can have an off-premise 64 square foot banner on any of these corners, you're gonna see a lot of them out there, and it's gonna hinder the ability. I'm not in favor of letting a for-profit have that. That said, I don't believe that any out-of-the-city or ETJ business should have an off-premise banner or sign within our city limits. I could see some exception to where the event is held within the city, but I don't think that if, like this particular example, I think that's inappropriate to allow them to utilize the space within our city, clutter our scenic view for something that has nothing to do with the city, either the business or the nonprofit or the event. Those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, just for clarity, so if, say, some of the shops down in Old Town, say at the shops at Old Town, with their art walk and stuff like that, so if they wanted to promote it with an off-premise banner somewhere else, that wouldn't be allowed, but all nonprofits can do it?
Well, if there's heartburn on that, then I say we just limit it to on-premise only. But I do believe that once you open it up to we have a whole lot more businesses that are gonna utilize this, and it's not just the art walk or the special, that kind of it. You're gonna have all sorts of businesses that are gonna do that.
Well, what about a collective? No, I'm thinking of.
I
along
get
this line.
that.
I'm thinking about, he's thinking of a collective group of,
That was just an example that
yeah,
came
I
to
mean,
mind.
Ladies' Night Out.
Ladies' Night Out.
Ladies' Night Out is a perfect example. I've seen that, a banner for that. We're not gonna allow that anymore? That's a pretty big event for that, and it brings people in. So
But
I'm
if you
thinking
allow
maybe
that, how are you gonna keep the auto parts place and
Well-
and all the rest of the places that
Well,
decide they're gonna have a 15
okay, let the auto
banner?
parts get in coalition with all the other auto parts places and.
How do you
is that-
regulate that?
Well, they,
You
can't.
say only collective businesses who are putting together a special event.
yeah, I don't think I don't know, we're talking about events here, like the art walk or the Ladies' Night Out. I don't know that auto parts
Special
stores would
sale.
have those kinds of things.
Well, we haven't
I've
done.
gone
this-
back to that, but I'm just saying,
Well, see, that's why we're talking about this now, so
Yeah.
that we can go back and change that.
so Rick, how do you envision that would be worded, that you could say a collective, collection of 2, collection of 5, 7, 10?
Well,
Where do
actually,
we- Where do you
actually,
define, I don't know how I'd love to know how it would be enforceable, because whatever we do, he has to
But
figure out how to
such
enforce
as
it.
the
well,
art walk.
that's the whole idea, is to come up with something that staff can't anticipate or guess what you guys are gonna be thinking, otherwise we're gonna be here for months on end. It's more, give us some real meat to put something together with, rather than just tossing all these ideas around. That's our goal here, but I'm not sure we're gonna meet it.
Well, I thought I had, but you didn't like it. I did say no off-premise business signage.
Yeah,
So that was my recommendation. Now, it may not be the consensus.
with that, I'd like to
But
ask
that was
Frank.
my recommendation.
Frank, it's always bothered me when we exclude a certain group of organizations or businesses. Is there any legal problems we could run into if we're excluding for-profit businesses but allowing carte blanche to nonprofit businesses? Because businesses for profit have to pay their bills, and if they have an event that they'd like to have a banner for off premises, is that a problem?
Possibly. And the reason I say possibly is cities are allowed to regulate commercial speech as long as it's content neutral. It's not one specific group. You're not regulating one group versus another with regard to commercial. Same with nonprofits. Cities are allowed to regulate certain aspects of things as long as you're not preventing their constitutional right for First Amendment. If they wanted to have a sign in support of basically a political sign. So I know those aren't covered here, but you are allowed to have content-neutral regulations, and they can be strict regulations as long as they're applied across the board.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Isn't a nonprofit a business?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. According to the Attorney General's office, there's an actual opinion that it is not a business like other businesses.
Okay.
So what you're saying in answer to his question is that we could designate no commercial, no for-profit business could have an off-premise sign.
Correct.
And that would not be discriminatory because we're not saying only auto parts places can't, but this kind of business can.
That's
So that could be done, and we could separate for-profit and nonprofit as far as the different regulation, as long as we do it equally within those groups.
Correct.
And we could also, but we could say we want a business, for-profit business, as long as it is a collective event, an event of several businesses that are having a
That not
special event.
violate what you just said, though?
Well, no, because I mean, what they're doing is you're allowing that group to have an event together. Don't know how often all the auto group stores will agree, you know, and so forth, but, you know, the way I understood the question was, it would allow for-profit groups to coordinate and request a sign for a specific event or a specific sale or something.
I'm just very much against just banning for-profits. I'm just very much against that, totally banning them, especially in light of the fact that we have these collective for-profit things and things happening in Old Town all the time, and I just don't like that idea at all.
What about allowing individual businesses to have all of the banners they want?
I don't want that either.
Okay.
No.
I could see a collective, if we could define it, if you could say like that, as a grouping, a collective, like for lack of a better term, a neighborhood sale. You know, I mean, I guess the businesses in a particular area could have a neighborhood sale. That, I could go with that, because again, it limits the number that we're dealing with. And I think the sheer volume that you come with when you let every one of the 100 and some businesses we have in town have the possibility of an off-premise banner, I think that gets to be way too much. I agree that I don't think we're gonna have that many collective neighborhood events, and yet I think that we could allow that, but I still say that any individual business who wants a banner at any of those four corners, I think we're gonna have so many, staff is not gonna like
No,
us.
I agree. If they have a business location in town, why just put your sign in front of your business? You know, why would you want to put it? I mean, I know that they would want to put it all over the place probably, but we don't have to allow that.
Well, one thing to think about, if they're located down at the end of Old Town, where there's not a whole lot of traffic, they might want to put a banner somewhere else off premises.
But this is, again, we're talking about, banners are for special events, right? And we haven't discussed what kind of event that is. So I think this is a kind of a moot point until we discuss what kind of banner event, or what we're, it's not, well, we'll get to that, I guess.
Yeah, that's what was covered under A1, purpose. Okay, going back, we have contacted Broadway Bank, and they're now just approving one until, I guess, we tell them otherwise. And I put on page 2 of 6 on my notes that I presented to you, under the note in the middle of the page, it is the responsibility of a property owner to monitor the number of approvals they give out for banners to be placed upon their lots, and it's imperative for them to know the importance of monitoring the volume now that we're getting them to understand what's going on. But it says it's inappropriate for us to place the burden upon them, because then most of them find themselves having to maybe deal with people like our staff does. I talked to Melissa at Broadway Bank, and she said she's had no one get obstinate with her, but she didn't know about the one banner. She thought there could be 3, and so she was just signing off on 3, but I think we've got that under control until this gets squared
Is there
away.
consensus then that, I know Paul was adamant with 1, but the others seem to think 2?
I wasn't thinking about the overlap with several events down there, so
So 2 per,
I'm okay with.
per corner lot, regardless of occupancy?
Okay, quick question about
But
that.
any other single-tenant tract in the city would be limited to 1? We're just talking about street corners?
Talking about street corners.
Street
Street
corners.
corners.
Well, and those 4 we talked about.
Okay,
Just those 4 for now? Or are we going to include the others that we talked about, Scenic Loop and
Plus.
Bandera?
Well, no, that's what I meant, the 4 intersections. is
4
what I meant.
intersections, okay. I
Is
thought
it
you meant the 4
Bandera
corners.
and Houseman, Scenic Loop and Bandera, Braun and 1560, and the two corners of Shanefield and 1560.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that,
Okay, quick question about the Broadway place. Is the city's marketplace banner considered part of the two?
we're exempt.
You're exempt, so it doesn't, you're not, it's the question I had. It's not considered part of the two.
No,
And I still have not, you've been telling me that that you can put the cities in the right of way. I've been looking everywhere. I can't find it where it says that's okay. I mean, it says here, it says right here that,
The code says that it can be in the right of way.
what, the Texas Administrative Code says that?
No, the city code.
Oh, the city code. So do you have permission from, does the city have permission from TxDOT to do that?
A business can get a permit through TxDOT if they so choose.
I've been trying to find that. I can't find how to do that. I've got a couple of emails in.
Yeah, they have a banner, they have a permit application.
yeah,
Okay.
I included, that's in here. On
it's in
illegal,
here?
yeah, on illegal signs and the permitting that's required. Okay, so we're talking about 2 banners allowed on the 4 corners, depending upon the approval of each property owner of those 4 intersections. But just 2 at Scenic Loop, I mean, at Gom and Shanefield and 1560. So that would be 2 banners allowed regardless of whether it's a single or multi-tenant. Okay, and keep in mind that if one corner's already taken, the other 3 corners are still available, so all the organization would have to do is go to that particular property owner and get permission for one of the other corners.
How many did you say for Braun in 1560?
2 for each corner.
Okay. So you can't put any on the fence across the street?
Well, you'd have to decide that. Beverly Hills, that's, Teetsy Plumbing's right there.
But it's not at Braun and 1560.
No, it's not. It's at
It's
a,
in Beverly Hills in 1560.
Yeah, so you'd have to add that.
What do you mean that? He has to add that?
Add it to the intersection that's allowable for, you've got 2 corners at Beverly Hills in 1560. Actually, Teetsy's not on the corner.
Yeah.
The Potters are on the corner.
that's true, it is not on the corner.
Yeah, there's actually a little car lot
Yeah.
that's there. So Teetsy is not, that's a,
You wanna go, oh, so
that's
you're
a
just
single
gonna
tenant.
add that as one of the, but it's not a corner. It's-
That's not a corner.
I
Teetsy,
mean, it's up to you guys if you want to. If not, we'll just go outside the city and put it up somewhere else,
yeah, Teetsy Plumbing
outside the
is,
ETJ.
Teetsy
I don't care.
Plumbing is a single tenant business that's not on a corner.
So they could put up a banner.
Who?
They could put up a banner for
For
Cornwall.
themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they could put up a banner for.
If they're a
one.
single tenant, they can put up a special event. Is there anything in our thing that
Or
says
not-
it has to be their own
But
event?
does TT sponsor,
That's a good question.
Does it have to be their own event, Rick? Can somebody put a banner on their own property advertising somebody else's event? I guess that would be an off-premise
That's
one,
not,
wouldn't it?
that's not covered in here that I can remember reading.
see, we're not gonna be able to cover every.
Absolutely.
No,
every-
no, and that's not the intent. The intent is just to,
Yeah. It's,
Get some good guidelines.
Yes.
yeah, cover,
Yeah.
cover most of
Let's
it.
err on the side of pro-business, pro-nonprofit, getting,
Yeah.
and less clutter, yes, we don't want clutter, I don't want clutter, but let's try to be have common sense with,
So are we gonna stick with
Okay.
the 4 we mentioned, or are we gonna try to
Yeah.
start going all?
For right now, we'll
let's
mention
stick
it
with that.
and see how it reads. Hopefully, we can put something together that makes sense. A5 down here, discussion seemed to lean toward removing the use of parallel or perpendicular when talking about orientation of a sign placement, and it's all to right-of-way. And Alex, I believe it was you that agreed with what I had in here, as I recall. We use property line instead of right-of-way.
Yeah.
And,
But we never addressed on the 4.
and we're addressing the placement of the sign on the private property. And then we want to prohibit banners in any public right-of-way. That was the discussion I picked up.
I agree.
So does that sound okay?
Yes. On 4?
A5.
I know, but on 4, we had a couple other things that I mentioned that we never got a consensus on, and that was whether or not we were going to allow an an out-of-city TJ banner to be put in our city.
For an event in the city or an event out of the city?
Either way, we
Well,
have to
because
decide.
we have Highland Games that comes in, and don't they usually put up a banner?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Highland Games.
But
So-
I would think that if the event is, or the business
The city.
in the city, then it should be allowable.
Yes.
That one should not be, because
Correct.
neither the event nor the business or the sponsor
Right.
is within the city.
Yeah,
So
I've
I think,
got
okay.
that note.
And then, are we going to differentiate off-premise banners for profit versus nonprofit? We got a ruling from our attorney, but we never came to a consensus on that moving forward.
Like I said, I don't agree that we should just eliminate the nonprofits, and that we should use some type of verbiage saying that collective events from the business community.
Well, then collective, would that be two or more? And what happens, say a business like Pete's down there in Old Town has a dance that's partly a fundraiser for disabled veterans, and he's trying to promote that event to get people out there. Would he be prohibited from putting an off-premises
Well,
banner?
that's kind of a nonprofit thing. It's not just.
No, it would be his profit, but he's given some of his profit to, say, an organization like that.
A lot of,
He's a profit business. So according to the way this is proposed, he wouldn't be able to have that banner. Unless you would say a for-profit business doing a charity event.
I think we all agree that the nonprofit then should be able to have it, right?
yes,
Okay, so the question really now is where we want to go with the for-profit. I agree with Councilmember Massey that a collective event, how we define it is the hard part.
Exactly.
And maybe by our next time, we can have a better definition from our staff to determine that. Punt.
I mean, can you put
but,
such a ladies' night out?
yeah.
Or the art walk, or, give them kind of examples.
But I don't believe,
Are there any other
I
such
don't believe
events?
that an individual business should have an off-premise signage. That's my opinion. I can envision that we have a lot of very nice businesses who may want to do that, and a collective I can live with, but a neighborhood kind of event, but we're gonna have a whole bunch of them.
Well, bringing up, this would be something I would think you would think of. Say you have a single business that wants to have an event, and if he's not allowed to have that event, he could get a couple of his neighbors to say, hey, will you go in with me on this so that I can have this event? And most neighborly businesses will say, sure, we'll go in. And then would that be a collective, even though you don't know it? But
I know, but
I'm saying you
what-
can't
okay.
prevent anything from
But
happening.
what
so-
we're gonna have, the auto
So give
parts
us
place,
a
right?
collective definition of collective. Is it two or more businesses joining
It's an
together?
event, the event is collective, not the businesses, so if it's
Then how would the staff put that to where you guys would be amenable to it?
I'll work on it, okay?
Okay. Collective event, you're gonna work on that.
I'm gonna work on words.
Okay, A5, let's go to A5 so we can get out of here. A5, A9. A9 is reducing the duration of the display. Last time we talked about dropping down the 30 days. Selena, put the next one up if you would. And this just demonstrates, that was any baby can when it went up. And then show the next one. Okay, that was any baby's can about 10 or 15 days after, and that's how it stayed the whole time. Some of them get worse than that. I call it banner droop. Most of the time, you can't read the banner. So that's why on duration, we were talking about taking it and allowing it 10 days prior to the event date for a single-day event, or the first day of a multiple-day event, with a maximum time a banner can be displayed limited to 15 days. That's pretty much what I got out of last time. The ending date of the permit shall be the date of a one-day event or the last day of a multi-day event, and the banner must be removed within 24 hours of the ending date of the permit. Hopefully that makes sense, and you guys can quickly either agree or disagree with that, but last time we were here, we talked about limiting it to 15 days total 10 days before the event. So if it's a one-day event, it would be 11 days. If it's a 14-day event, a 4-day event, it would be 14 days. That was the impression we got. Or that I
agree with
got.
that. I agree with that.
Okay.
Are we gonna get to frequency yet?
I don't remember. Let's just keep moving. Okay, so A9 seems to be okay? I put in a star by A9. Okay, A10, discussions seem to indicate an agreement to omit this section of the ordinance in its entirety. And that was the special provision one that just never has made sense to me, and it still doesn't, no matter how many times I read it. And that's where a unique special event, as determined by city administrator, can have 2 banners, one of them being 150 square feet and the other one being 125 square feet. And I can tell you the city administrator has a tough time deciding what a unique special event is and why it should be allowed to have 2 gigantica banners. Am I right on that?
Have you ever had one, a unique one?
Yeah?
Well, the Festival Association frequently has more than one.
That's the next question I was going to bring up. Are you going to allow certain events to have 2 banners, not at the same intersection?
Yeah, we mentioned that, but we
It's
didn't,
not,
we didn't
it's
go back
not us, it's you guys.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Why are you talking to you?
Okay, good.
I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
I know.
We're talking
okay.
about. they
You
could
see,
have
this kind of,
two.
Can
this
we go back
pertains
and
to...
just say, do we agree on 9? Because A9 is right.
Yes, sir. But now
Okay.
you're going, now we're talking about eliminating A10, and A10 was a part of the 2 banners. Remember?
That's for unique special events, and
That
to
was the
allow
size.
gigantic banners, it says that the sign ordinance doesn't apply. So we're trying
do
to
we
get
talk
rid of
about-
that and make it specific. And I think I cover that down here in the next area where at a special event on site, you can have basically as many banners as you want.
I'm talking about off-site 2 banners for an event. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
This
We
is
already
at the
talked
time,
about that,
so it's okay to do?
as long
But
as they're
just-
not on the same intersection.
Okay, that's a done deal. I'm sorry, I thought it wasn't a done deal.
No,
Okay,
it's-
I'm done.
As far as I know, it's a
Okay.
done deal.
Sounds good.
So are you guys in favor of doing away? Because the one
Yes.
that was brought to you in March didn't have that.
Yeah.
And you guys seem to be
That's
okay with
it's
it.
fine with me.
Okay, A11, permit, suggested language change, and it's pretty long there, but, and for some reason it printed out funny, but the gist of it's there. Banner permits required for all on-site and off-site banners displayed within the corporate city limits or the city's ETJ. The permit shall state the period, and then it goes on with that. And we're going to change up how the permit has a sticker on it, so it's easier for code enforcement to see the sticker from the street without having to get out of his vehicle and walk around behind the banner and some other stuff in there. Can't be in the text dot right away. And hopefully you guys read that, so I'm not gonna read the whole thing.
I'd just like to add that when I looked up online, TxDOT, I know we're gonna give them a warning and do all this stuff to, and hold the banner for 30 days. TxDOT gives no warning, they just take it down. So I'm just telling you, I don't know if it's gonna be taxing for our code enforcement guy or not, but
Actually, I've got illegal signs in the right of way, and they do give notice.
not what I read. I don't have proof of it, but anyway, keep going.
It's in here.
Okay.
Okay, so this basically is just changing the language on the permit. So if you guys don't have any problem with any of that, we'll write that up as part of the permit section of 6644A.
Okay.
And we're leaving off this section where it says a banner permit is required for all banners placed parallel or perpendicular to the public right of way.
Yeah, we're just saying regardless of orientation, it's the property line.
Okay.
Oh, boy, here we go.
And then I just had, some other thoughts under additional notes. Not to give preferential treatment one over the other of nonprofit or for-profit, but you guys have decided that's okay. The last, methods of advertising, bringing attention. Okay, this is where we're talking about flag banners, because we've talked about it before, and I've got some pictures here. So Selena, would you do the next one, please? This is a flag banner that is up at Marketplace just for the day at one of the food booths, and it's a nice-looking banner, bright red. Next one. Next slide, Selena. This is, CPS had a special event at Prudrati's earlier this year, and when I went over to that, they had that sandwich sign and a banner, a flag banner. Next one, Selena, please. That's just the same thing, a little closer, and then one more. And then that's the banner itself. So it's just an attention getter, and it's just something to consider for a short duration event. Having it out there as long as the banners are approved for content and everything. And then I found some banners online, so Selena, thumb the next one. Oh, this is the car show, that Memorial Day car show at the 4-H. And I just took a picture of that because each of those nifty cars had a flag banner. So that's all on site at the 4-H. And it was very unobtrusive, and it was interesting. Next one. Okay, this is a typical flag banner for whatever purpose. And flip the next one. This is just more, and these are called feather banners. Next one. Of course, these are teardrop. Just go. More feathers. Teardrop again. Blade. We saw some of these out on 1604 today. Next one. Pinpoint. Have not seen one of these anywhere. Shark fin flags. Those, I've seen those around. More. Swoopers. Next one. Concave. Okay, hold up there. And what I put here is recommend the following as a possible solution, and I'll just read this real quick. Figures, objects, and the dancing stick figures that are inflated using a blower, fan, or any other means of blowing air to allow the figure to or object to maintain its shape or movement are prohibited. And then suggest considering whether to allow balloons, because we've had people ask about balloons. If allowed, it's recommended to limit the diameter of the balloons, say to 36 inches, and limit the maximum number of balloons, and I just picked 12. Limit the maximum height the balloon can be displayed to 16 feet above natural grade. And then going back to these vertical banners, also known as flag, feather, teardrop, blade, pinpoint, shark fin, swooper, concave, shall be allowed during grand openings. There's that word special sale events and one-time annual festivals or events. For the purposes of this section, the term flag banner will be all-inclusive of all of them. And I just came up with a number. 6 flags will be allowed for each 100 feet of frontage, shall only be placed on private property, not on public right-of-way. This allows a minimum spacing of 20 feet between flag banners. On properties of less than 100 feet of frontage, the minimum spacing between the flag banners shall be 20 feet. And then went on to discuss it more. And just wanted to throw this out at you guys because as we know, this type of advertising is pretty acceptable everywhere. The only thing that I see as negative about it is where they're allowed to stay up so long they get faded, weather beaten, and just look bad. But the intent here is you guys might consider allowing them because the Festival Association has them up during Carnival, and that would allow other organizations on their properties during events to have at least some of these, the 1 day, 2, 3, or 4 days, but no longer than 5 days. So it would be 5 days or the duration of the event, whichever is less. And that's basically what I came up with. So Cynthia, you want to start with that one?
Yes, I have no problem with this. They are attention-getting. They're only up for 5 days for an event.
Or the
Or a
duration
special
of the
sale.
event. And the way I came up with that is the Carnival is 4 days. And so that would cover their event, but it would also cover all the other people's events, not just Carnival.
Well, I like the fact that it is just for a short period of time. They are very effective, and I have seen them all over town. Some of them are they do draw your attention to the business or whatever it is that's going on. And I think that this is a good thing for our businesses and for our nonprofits. Everyone's vying for attention, and I think for this short period of time, I don't see a problem with it. They don't bother me when I drive, around and see them.
Yeah, because I see them more as a weekend event or a one-day event, like CPS or Marketplace. Alex, your input?
I have a question, really, I guess more for staff. Given the fact that, as you just indicated, that most of these are weekend events, and our code compliance officer doesn't regulate things on weekends, what's to prevent a business to see other people put them up that are not necessarily permitted, and then just go in there and stick a whole bunch of them up for the weekend and come back down? I mean, we'll never actually see it, but we'll see a plethora of these all over the city, because they'll see others have it and they won't have it. How will we regulate that? This seems like it's going to be a nightmare to regulate. You can't have them more than 20 feet, closer than 20 feet apart. You can't have more than 6 of them in 100 feet, which of course puts one on each corner. I don't know how in the world we would regulate this sort of thing as far as abuse of it, even if they did get a permit. What if the guy says, well, I only have, I have an area, I'm gonna put it 3 along the road and then 2 that go back along the road, so they're 20 feet apart. Maybe I zigzag them along. I don't know how in the world we'd regulate it. I figure I'm gonna lose this battle, but I'm not in favor of them. But as long as I'm probably gonna lose the battle on this one, I think we need to regulate it very carefully to make sure that we don't end up with a situation on that. I'm presuming, although I didn't see it here, that it has to be strictly on their own premise, right?
Yes.
And so that would limit them to not being on a neighbor's property, et cetera. And I'm glad we don't like those dancing figures and balloon blowing. I'm curious more about the balloons. Are we gonna limit them to the time period as well?
That was my
we
thought,
have-
but again, I'm just tossing this stuff out to give you guys some talking points and give us some direction, because occasionally people do ask for these, and it is an ongoing, as I said here, methods of advertising and bringing attention to an event change over time, and in recent years, these are becoming more and more prevalent. I did put down here, all flag banners must be approved as to content and permitted, but only one permit is required regardless of the number of flag banners being displayed. And then they cannot exceed 12 feet in height as measured from natural grade. So that would give some limitation. As far as regulation, somebody could put one of these or 2 or 3 of these up now, and it's not covered. So it would be the same thing. At least we've addressed it in the ordinance.
Well, I just see people putting them up over and over again and then taking them down before our code compliance can even do that.
That probably happens now.
So, because I don't believe they go looking at this stuff on weekends. So, I'm not in favor, but I figure I'm gonna lose it, so I'm gonna probably say that we need to be very careful how we allow it, but. that's
Well,
my-
is this basic language good enough to where we can include that for next time? I mean, let's hear from
I think
Paul.
it's clear.
Paul and Bert. Are you done?
Yes, I'm done, thank you.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of the dancing thing, so I'm okay with that. I do like the flag banners. I think they're very effective for businesses. I don't think I would have too much heartburn if somebody threw a flag out. The barbecue guy down there, he's selling barbecue, and draw some attention to his restaurant or something like that. So I'm okay. I do like that we're only gonna limit it to 4 days in a row. So I have no heartburn about that at all. I think they're effective for businesses. And I'm fine with the language.
So allowing any of those types, basically, that anybody wants, that's pretty inclusive. Bert?
Okay, the only thing I have a problem with is the 4 days, because, as you know, Carnival is 4 days long, and we put up the banners at least a day before the event starts because we have a lot to do. And 4 days, having to put it up the day of the event, when it starts in the morning, it's going to tax our volunteers. So I would like to have an extra day to do that.
It says 5 days.
It's a 5-day.
No, it's-
five-day-
that's not what it says.
5-day event, or the duration of the event, whichever is less. I had 24 hours in there before, but when you and I talked about it, you said HEB puts those up.
They do sometimes, and sometimes we put them up. It depends. And and whenever HEB comes out there and they do themselves, they do it even earlier than that. So we're going to have to regulate it. I would like to have at least one day.
Well, originally, like I said, I had 24 hours prior to the event, I was tossing it out there, but when you said HEB puts them up and they could put them up
Sometime,
that
like I
day.
said,
Well, that's
I'll
new
correct-
information for me.
I'm sorry, I'll correct
So we
myself.
can.
Sometimes we do it, sometimes
so
they do it.
Anybody have a problem with 24 hours before the event? They can put a banner flag up? Okay, so we'll put that language in there.
There is, I think we need to be a little bit more specific about that this is strictly for,
The-
it says
the
placed on
event?
private property, but that, to me, it's not specific enough to, it should say, the private property of the business or nonprofit being advertised.
Okay, we can do that.
And no off-premises, such of these signs will be allowed. In other words, we don't want to see them all over the corners.
Right. So
Can-
basically, this language is okay. And you're okay with the way we wrote, or I wrote, figures, objects, and the dancing stick figures? I have no earthly idea what to call them other than that. But any of those inflatable things, inflatable gorillas, elephants, those kinds of things is what I'm talking about here. Those are all prohibited.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, maybe I'm getting too nitpicky here, but what are we going to call an event?
We're back to frequency again.
Would this fall under the A1 that we're still debating?
Yeah, I thought I had that in here.
Because we haven't determined that, right?
Not yet.
Is it in here?
It says
I thought I had put it in here, but that was my idea, was for a special event, special sale, or any event or a sale, or an annual festival or event.
It says one-time or annual festivals and events.
Yeah. We'll dress that up, and then you guys can look at it next time.
I'm just going to throw this out there. So can Casa Helotes put one of these signs up, these little teardrop signs, in front of their truck once a month, if they get a permit? Would this be allowable in this
In
wording?
front of what truck?
In front of their property?
On their property?
On their property.
Sure.
Okay.
No, she said once
For
a
an
month.
annual Oh, once a month?
Yes, because,
Oh.
yes.
Well, we haven't
No, it
addressed,
just
we
says
haven't
annual
determined the
events.
frequency yet.
Yeah,
because-
it's a one-time grand opening, sale, or an annual festival or event. And that's the intent of what I wrote here on all of these.
So a business couldn't throw one out there on the weekends to draw attention to their business?
Not every weekend. No.
Unless, of course, they
Unless
call
it-
it something as a one-time event every weekend.
One-time sale, I
And
mean, we're
there's-
back to
like
your
I said, my
deal.
example is you
But
could have
they
a
have
Labor
to
Day,
have
an
a
Independence
permit
Day,
each
Memorial
time.
Day, spring break.
Yeah.
You know, autumnal equinox,
The-
you know,
the
whatever
way-
you want to.
The way this is
You
written.
can even have one once a month again, and
Okay,
maybe,
let's try and sum this up. The way it's written, it would preclude that the best we can. So we're hopefully going to get this together where next time we'll have some meat to it rather than just a bunch of stuff here to discuss. So is there anything that we didn't discuss that you have heartburn about? I think we covered everything that would handle Carnival, but not prohibit or limit other nonprofits
What
from
about,
also having
what
this.
about, I don't know if this is part of this or not, but what about the 20 by 30 banner we put up with the HEB logo on it? That's part of our contract with them, and if we don't do that, we will lose a lot of money.
And where do y'all put that?
Put that on
Right
the,
there, going in.
going into the, where the,
Fence?
Yeah, where, you know, where you drive in and go to the parking lot, it's right there facing
It's
the
on
parking.
your own property, and
Yes.
that's,
Well, yeah, but it's bigger than 64 square feet. So about the only thing you could do is allow it for all nonprofits, for special events or whatever, however you want to call it, or get a variance.
they don't need to be asking for a variance. They've been doing this for how many years, and then all of a
Just,
sudden now
just
they're-
52.
Well, then you're gonna
Come
have,
on. So, let's talk about the spirit of this, you know,
I got the spirit, but you gotta have an ordinance, so I'm just asking you guys
Yes,
to
sir.
come up with.
You're
with
right,
something.
I agree with you. We do have to have rules.
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
well, what other property is big enough that's gonna want a gigantic sign like that? The Lions Club, maybe? I'm
Yeah.
thinking, you know, and that's fine, hell, I don't care,
I don't either.
you know, so let's throw it in there that, you know.
That's
we
what I
can do
told him
that.
earlier today. I said, we'll just add it in there, and if somebody wants a 20 by 30 banner, they can put one up
In their own property.
on their own property,
They
yeah.
better have a SkyTrack and stuff to do it.
That's why I'm saying, probably nobody else will do it. So if you want to include it, we'll include
I think we
it.
should include it. I don't wanna be them to be coming every year asking for a
I don't
variance
either.
after 52 years.
Okay.
It's ridiculous.
I appreciate
What,
that.
what we're trying to do is make
Oh, we
everything.
eliminated variances. We couldn't ask for a variance.
No, that was just on the, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, is
We
it
got you
wise
covered,
to
okay?
eliminate the variance
Yes, sir.
request?
Thank you. Thank you.
It's,
So I have a question.
Okay.
The flag banners, are they overlapping the other banners? So if an individual business or nonprofit chooses to have a banner, are they limited to having the flags or the 64 square foot banner?
I don't think
Because
so.
at this point, don't we have, well, we
No,
haven't
because those
clarified
little-
that.
My idea was let them have whatever they want to promote their business on their property during that event.
Because the banner's gonna have a lot more information than those little flags. Those are mostly just to people's eyes turn to it, and they have maybe one word on them. I mean, they don't,
I get
And-
that. I'm questioning whether the intent, the way this will be written, will or will not permit that.
well, to me.
Are you
it
talking
does.
about at the intersections or on their property?
Well, both.
No, we're not gonna have it on the
You're
intersection.
saying that they're limited to one
This is-
particular banner, and then,
This is on their property. The flag banners, they're not off
I just said
premises.
no off premises on such thing.
But it's very hard to regulate this stuff because like for the Memorial Day Car Show at the 4-H, there were 5 banners on the fence there. And I didn't even check to see if they were permitted. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's a charitable event and you just, I mean, this stuff happens. So all we're trying to do is set some guidelines the best we can.
Is it wise to leave that thing in about not having a variance at all, to just, this is it, even though there might something to come up in the future? Is it wise? to
There
do
is a
that?
section, and I did not bring it, maybe Rick knows it, Ernest pointed it out to me. We could just make it for banner size only and let everything else have a variance. Unless y'all want to leave a variance potential in there for banners to larger size, it'd come to council.
Or where are we gonna add this banner for the Festival Association or the Carnival?
I would think in this last section with the flag banners, because it's all intended for a big event or a special event.
Okay.
We'll work it out and you guys can figure what you want to do. Okay, as far as I know, that's everything that we had discussed in here. So I think we did make some headway tonight. And Rick
We
and,
never did the first one, A1.
it was in limbo. You want to take it out of limbo?
Well,
Talk about it?
I
It's
don't know.
up to you guys. Why don't you let us work it out, and then what we'll do is we'll send this out early as we can get it, and then you guys can peruse it and give us some feedback back, and we can fine tune it for the next meeting.
Well, one of the things you said is you recommend defining special event and recurring event. So it would be good if you did define it so that we can know what you're talking about.
I did that. I put to advertise a grand opening of a business, I put special sale event, an annual festival, or annual event hosted by a for-profit business or a nonprofit organization.
Wait a minute, is
These
this,
are my notes
is
that
this
I,
on page one of,
these are the notes that you got yesterday.
oh, this is the notes. Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
A1 purpose. And I just toss that out there for discussion point. It's up to you guys to come up with it. We did put corporate city limits of Helotes or ETJ.
Okay.
And that gets rid of the special event and the recurring event. The way it's written very obscurely, I thought.
So,
Because it
the
says something
thing
about
is,
monthly.
so a special sale event does not have to be just once a year. It could be more than once a year.
Yeah,
Okay. But the festival has to be an annual event. And the grand opening of a business will lapse.
that was the idea I tossed out for discussion.
Okay.
I'm just trying to tie some of this stuff down for staff.
So, okay, so,
Paul just handed me something here, says advertise a business event, charitable event, annual event held or hosted by a for-profit business or a nonprofit organization being held within the city or ETJ, so something along that line.
so these businesses and these nonprofits that have recurring events once a month, they're not gonna be able to put any banners up for them. Just one.
Well, there's only one that does that I'm aware of, so you're talking about CASA, so
Right.
you either exempt them or let everybody do it.
Okay, but the problem is with the food truck deal, that's not even legal.
That's,
No, that's not necessarily true either.
What do you mean?
No, it's, the food truck is not a park, and it's just there for a few hours and it leaves. It's not, the intent, because I remember discussing it, was not to have one stationed on the corner somewhere for eternity, you know, like a business, putting a skirt around it and making it look like a business. We didn't want a trailer park, but this is different.
well, that's what happens out by Picasso's. I think it comes in there once or twice a month, and some food trucks come together out on Bernie Stage Road. They do the same thing on weekends.
Yes, but those are for-profit, you know,
Yeah.
situations. This
I
is
understand.
food trucks have become a very important part of fundraising for nonprofits. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And like I said, they're there for a few hours and they leave. So I don't believe that is something, no, it's not mentioned in our ordinances whether that is illegal for someone to have a fundraiser like that using a food truck.
Exactly.
So it is not illegal, but,
I disagree.
but that's not the issue. I guess the issue is they're not going to be able to put a banner up. And I'm not saying that they should be exempted. Just because they're the only ones that are doing it now, doesn't mean that another organization might not want to, but
True.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay. So, do you want that in this particular section, banner section, written somehow? And if so, you said, I think you were going to work on that. Weren't you going to work on something?
I'm working on something. I'm working on the collective event.
Oh, the collective, okay. Maybe you can work on that, too. Anything else on this before we move to the last item? Okay, because we certainly want to give the last item some attention, since these folks are threatening to sue us. By the way, we're 2 minutes away from the proposed curfew. Okay, let me find this one on the agenda. Thank you, by the way. I think we made some headway there. I'll check with Rick and Selena tomorrow and see if they concur, but I believe we made some headway. Okay, this is a discussion and action on an ordinance amending Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 62, peddlers and solicitors by altering authorized hours of operation and extending the 6 o'clock curfew to 9 o'clock curfew. As you see in your packet, we received to me, a rather threatening out-of-the-chute letter for litigation if we didn't do this, and then we have found out since that there's a lot of this going around the country and in Texas and even in San Antonio, and Frank can address that. But it's pretty obvious that Moxie Pest Service wants to knock on doors until 9 o'clock at night, and if they're not able to, they'll sue the city. And with that, I'll ask for a motion and a second to discuss and take action on whether or not to amend the curfew time on this particular issue. So we have a motion and a second.
Mayor, I make a motion, we discuss, take action on 12.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Fredericks. Bert, it's your motion, so you're up.
Okay, I've read through the literature on this, and my first question was going to be, who picked 9 PM as being the curfew end? And it said that was just done in courts. They just said 9 o'clock and that's it.
The courts, and Frank can elaborate on this, but the courts, the way I see it, because I asked the same question, what makes 6 o'clock unconstitutional, but 9 o'clock constitutional? And it seems to be the prerogative of the courts, and the courts have determined that 9 o'clock is okay, but 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, all of those are unconstitutional. So my next question was, what happens when the next business that sells something that sells especially well late at night wants to come in and solicit until 10 or 11? Will we have the same issue? But it seems like the courts have all joined together, and 9 o'clock seems to be the acceptable curfew time.
Is that all, that's all correct, Frank?
That is correct.
Okay.
So Frank, you
Next-
want to
next-
just give
can I
a-
another question?
Okay,
Please, I'm sorry, didn't mean to.
It's okay.
They wanted an answer from 1 week from the date of the letter, but you negotiated with them and they're good. They were going to wait till after this meeting?
yeah, you have
Yes
that
and no.
included.
We,
in-
we,
Yes.
we sent them a letter.
But did they agree to it? I mean,
Yes.
well, I don't know the
No,
verbiage.
no.
No, they didn't.
What happened is, we sent the letter on the
Yeah.
week and basically announcing that the city council would consider it on June 14th, the date of their next council meeting.
Yes, sir.
They responded with an email and what they called a stand-down agreement, which
Yeah.
basically said that they thought June 14th was too long, and they requested that we enter into a stand-down agreement, which basically was we would agree for 2 weeks not to enforce our ordinance, because their client, Moxie Pest Control, was wanting to go out and solicit in Helotes, and in fact, did apply for a permit to solicit in Helotes. And my direction to staff was that the ordinance is 6 PM, and that's what we're going to enforce, 6 PM until the council amends it. We responded to that email with our email, basically, with a letter basically stating that, no, we would not agree to the stand-down agreement, and that we would continue meeting on June 14th, and the council will decide at that time, and we'll let them know what council decides after the June 14th meeting.
Okay.
And they finally responded saying they were disappointed with our decision, but they would agree to wait until after this meeting.
Yeah, that's on the second to last blue tab. Says, "We are disappointed with your decision to delay making the determination until June 14th, but in the interest of avoiding unnecessary litigation, we will simply delay filing suit. If the council either implements the proposed 9 PM curfew or authorizes a suspension of the 6 PM curfew via the stand-down agreement, Moxie will not file suit." So that says right there, they're waiting to hear from Frank tomorrow.
Okay. That's what you, okay, well, it looks like to me that we're in a rock and a hard place, going to have to do it. I don't like getting pushed around like this, but it looks like we're going to have, I mean, in my mind, we're going to have to do this. I don't know if I can bring this up or not. This is not on the, because this isn't really part of the, well, it's in the literature, but it's not really part of the agenda item. I've got a no-knock list, frequently asked questions. I was thinking that maybe we should think about doing this for our citizens. I know our citizens are legally able to put up a no solicit sign, and that's supposed to stop peddlers and solicitors from coming on your property, but it does not stop religious entities from coming onto your property.
Well, it depends on the sign that you put on your yard. If it says no trespassing, that prevents anyone.
Anybody?
And if
Okay.
it's no soliciting or no solicitors, then you're right, it could limit as to who proceeds. I will tell you a little bit of, This firm has been sending letters like this. It sent it to 2 of my cities last year. Both Almus Park and Terrell Hills amended their ordinances to 9 PM. They didn't want to be the test case in Texas. Almus Park, the council was upset basically getting the threatened letters. So what they did is they printed up no soliciting, no trespassing signs and made them available to citizens to come pick them up and put them on their doors so that it would prevent anyone from soliciting. It is my opinion that very few solicitors go door to door anymore. It's all internet, email,
Yeah.
and so forth. This firm has made money challenging cities that did not amend their ordinance and have been successful in getting their attorney's fees. If you look at his original letter that he sent us on May 24th, he lets us know what his hourly rate is.
Yeah,
Just so that he can let you know how much his attorney's fees are going to be estimated, which lets me know how underpaid I am. But anyway, that's another issue. But anyway, but again, they sent, and there are 2 other cities in the area who received it this year. The cities of Schertz and Live Oak have both received the same letters. Schertz and Live Oak are currently looking at the issue. They've not decided how they're going to proceed yet. Their city attorney has not yet briefed their city council with regards to this. I will tell you that the cases that are out there are no Texas cases or Fifth Circuit cases. Those are the ones we really rely on unless there's a Supreme Court case. But the circuits that have ruled on it basically have picked 9 PM as the reasonable hour. And according to solicitors, they claim that the 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock hour is their most profitable when they do door-to-door sales.
That's what they're saying.
But that's their,
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the way they say they really respect the law and everything, but if you don't change it, they're going to sue you. And we did add the no knock, we're calling it, I think we're calling it a do not disturb. We've added that language in there as an option that we can do that, and staff and I are looking at a way to monitor that and have people register for it.
so that when
But-
someone comes for a permit, they'd be, if the city is able to do this, provide them a list of these are the addresses that do not.
But am I correct in saying that for a no-knock list, you cannot do that to a nonprofit? I mean, I think it is. Let me see what I have right here. Oh, nonprofit, not-for-profit, religious, political, and charitable groups are not subject to this list. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But, well,
If somebody doesn't want some.
yeah, if you put a no trespassing sign,
But no, this is just if you go to the no-knock list.
correct, you're right. If you have a list, it would not apply to those
Would not
groups.
apply to those things, those
groups.
entities that I
But if
just
you
said.
go to the residents and they have a no trespassing sign, that would apply to anyone, and anyone who trespasses the police could be called.
Okay.
But it would apply, the no knock or do not disturb list would apply to commercial
That's correct.
solicitors.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, Paul, is that all for you?
Yes, sir.
Paul?
I just, I had heartburn about the 9 o'clock. I would have preferred dusk, when it's
Yeah.
dark.
I had put sunset, 30 minutes past sunset, but it's specifically mentioned in one of these
Yeah.
court cases that doesn't work either.
Right, and that's because during the winter months, it gets dark earlier.
Well, that's the
And-
whole idea.
Right.
Daylight savings time.
And again, it would be around 5:30, 6 PM where it would get dark, and they're claiming that's unconstitutional because that's when they would be able to go the door-to-door solicitation, so. But I agree, I mean, the dark is the reason, the safety issue.
Yeah,
But the courts have basically said, if you want to argue safety, you have to prove that your city basically has a lot of crime in order to be able to prove, and defend such an ordinance.
and
Most of these small cities don't have the criminal,
according to the ordinance, they still have to go through the background check and put in
Correct.
the application and receive a picture ID tag from the PD, and that'll all still be part of this. The only thing that's gonna change is the 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So anything else?
No.
Other than your heartburn?
Yes.
Okay. Cynthia?
No, we have to do this. I don't see a problem with it. I don't really see it as being that big an issue. I don't like people coming to my door at 5 or 4 or 2, and they do. And I always just tell them, sometimes I don't open the door, sometimes.
Need to put a no trespassing sign.
Yeah, I do. I should. But I also do think it is unconstitutional to not allow someone to to attempt to do something like this.
It's your private property.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, that I always thought us as a city, regulating something like this is a little iffy. People should be allowed to move around.
You can regulate who does it. It's just the time seems to be the issue, right? So anything else?
No.
Alex?
I have a question. First of all, I think the 9 o'clock is something that's a foregone conclusion. But in the ordinance, as we have it presented here, the question really is more the enforcement and the ramifications of violation, okay? So in here, it indicates on the first page, under 62-1A, it shall be unlawful for any solicitors to canvass orders for service, merchandise, blah, 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 or even of the handing of basically even of putting paper on your front door or on your doorstep, right? So that's what it deems here as unlawful. The next section on the next page talks about how the city will keep a do not disturb list of any resident who wants to be on that, right? So if presumably, if I went to the city and went and said, my address is one of these lists, and then I end up with a flyer on my door, or somebody comes to my doorstep any time of the day, not just after 9 o'clock, theoretically, based on this, I could say they were in violation of this ordinance. The penalty is located down below, where it says, licenses issued under this provision of this chapter may be revoked by the chief of police after notice for any of the following causes. Item 3, any violation of this chapter. So if I were to get a flyer on my door after putting my name on the list, I could come to the city and they could have their license revoked.
Their permit, correct.
Okay, so the question I kind of had, because I live in a neighborhood that is a private community, and while anybody can get past the gates that wants to, if they're just diligent enough, we also have signs posted on the entrance to the neighborhood, says no soliciting, okay? I'm going to guess that your interpretation is that because it's at the neighborhood entrance, it does not apply to my residence unless I have one at my residence, is that correct?
That's not correct.
Okay,
With gated communities, that is all, because they're not public streets. It's
Okay.
all private property.
Because we get solicitors regularly through my neighborhood, knocking on the doors, handing out bills, and advertising their
If your
services.
subdivision has no solicitation, no solicitors, and they go on to any aspect of that private property, they could be in violation of this ordinance. They are in violation of this ordinance.
And if they're legitimate, again, it's hard to regulate, knowing when people are out there knocking on doors, if they don't have that ID, they're not a legitimate peddler. If you look at the list that Rick got from dispatch and is included in your packet, since February of 2016 through April of this year, we had 27 complaints about soliciting. And I just looked at 8 of those were after 6 p.m. And, but we don't know whether the complaint was because of the hour or something else. But we don't get many complaints. And there's a little explanation on the back about each one. But, I guess we just have to encourage people to call or just let it keep going like it is. But we do our best by issuing the permits and the IDs and wait for people to call the cops.
We need to somehow get the message out to our citizens, if we decide to vote this way, about this new ordinance.
Well, a few years ago, I put an article out on solicitors and told people, don't talk to anybody unless they have the peddler's tag. But of course, people do,
Yeah.
and people still
Well, now we have to
solicit.
tell them that, because I have a feeling we will be getting more phone calls. Someone comes to your house at 8 o'clock.
I don't know, like I say, 8 of the 27 in the last 2+ years was after 6 p.m., but we don't know if that was the reason the police were called or dispatch was called.
Okay, yeah, and our attorney just said that they're making their money from suing cities, so they're really not going door to door anyway.
Did they really
Okay,
make that much money?
do you have any follow-up, Bert?
No, I was just wondering, did they really make that much money, over $500,000? On that Castle Rock or whatever it
Those,
was?
well, most of it was attorney's fees.
Wow. Oh, okay. That's all I had, sir.
Paul, anything else?
No, sir.
Cynthia, you okay? Alex?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, so a yes vote or an aye vote will be to approve changing the curfew time from 6 PM to 9 PM. A nay vote would be to not approve it or to deny it. So we'll call the question. All in favor of approving the change of curfew time from 6 to 9, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And the new
It was
curfew.
not a very forceful aye.
Well, I hope everybody can understand the reason for this and that the Moxie Pest Service caused the whole issue and take it from there. And we'll encourage no trespassing or no soliciting signs. Okay, that's our last item. And again, thanks for the discussion and direction on signs, specifically banners. We'll try and get that to you next meeting. So if there are no objections to adjourning, I will adjourn this meeting, and we will adjourn it at 9:16.